Okay, I think with that, Martin, I'm going to hand back over to you, and we'll have another couple of slides, and then we'll take questions.
Can we actually do questions after the major segments? Because I can't remember his presentation now, and I had questions. It would be better for us, those of us who are wanting to engage, if we could ask questions throughout instead of waiting until the end.
If you want, we're consultancy. Sure. So you have a question?
I do.
Yes.
My name is Andrea. I'm a fourth year health sciences student, and I'm known in my circles as someone who loves school. I really love school. So I just want to put that out there because this place is deeply important to me, and my whole life depends upon what happens here moving forward. And so I understand that things are expensive. We're living in one of the most expensive places in the world, and so that's super fun. It's to survive here. That's great. And so as much as I'm concerned about 2% increases, I think what I'm concerned about the most is that this is going to be every year. And then that's a lot just for me as a domestic student. But what I'm really concerned about is these increases for international students and the impact that that's going to have on them and their places of origin. That's going to be stratifying things, not only here at school. I have international friends who are working full-time and going to school full-time. That's not a sustainable life. That's not an enjoyable life. And the pressure that it puts on these students to have to pay way more than me in the first place. First of all, that's just not unjust. That's us impacting things for people who simply weren't born here in a way that it's pretty hard to justify. And second of all, if things are going up on 8%, that's so much. And so in terms of the countries that you're speaking of, which, there aren't, I'm trying to think of countries that have, students from the US, yeah, they're getting a good deal coming here, and I hear about that all the time. They come to SFU instead of going to an Ivy League school, and their parents are laughing all the way to the bank, and that's great. But what about students from countries that have already been marginalized by the actions of Canada in the first place? In the first place, and how are we addressing that? And while I do appreciate that bursaries are happening and scholarships are happening, just on the level of justice, we come here because we're accessing what is really an aggregate of the total of human accomplishment in terms of intellectualism, anything to do with human education. This isn't something that it's if you're lucky enough to go to school, you should be able to get. This has been amassed across the entirety of human history, and we have a right to it. And so I want to know, while there are oil and gas subsidies happening around Canada, both provincial and federal, I want to know what the school is doing and how we can help to actually try to find other sources of funding so it's not being unloaded on people and communities that have already been marginalized by the actions of Canada.
So let me go that first one, and feel free to pipe in. So a couple of things. First of all, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. The grandparenting clause is something that SFU deliberately put in because we wanted to take the uncertainty away from international students. So at least now the international students who are here have more certainty as to where the fee increases are. I think we are continuing to put more and more money into the bursaries, recognizing what you're saying. And also Martin talked about we're actually strategically and deliberately investing in advancement. Given that the government grant is set, and given that the government grant does not acknowledge international students, so it is for a defined number of domestic undergraduate students. I think the only solution really is to seek external funding and to leverage those 15 cents to yield that dollar that we can then invest back in the students.
So I guess a rapid response. So that would be a follow-up question would be, what are we going to do as a community here at SFU to make sure that the business plan isn't simply to increase tuition the maximum legally allowed limit every year? Because that's not sustainable.
And maybe just add a little bit to what Peter has said. Certainly going back 3 years ago, we made a conscious path on what we were going to do with tuition, and we followed that path. What we're proposing to do this year is set another path, so not change it every year, but set the path forward. And I'm very sympathetic to the comments that have been made as well. I really mean that. You look at the cost of education. I'm not only the Vice President of Finance, but I'm a father that has kids in the educational system. I see what it costs for kids to go to school, and it's expensive. Really what we're talking about, or at least what I'm hearing, is it's really a public policy discussion. And how we fund higher education and where we go with it. At the end of the day, we have to make the budget balance. There's a couple variables. One is tuition, one is cutting. Certainly, I can imagine the reaction to cuts and how that would be received as well, particularly if there's student services and some of the things that we value. So, I think that one of the things that was a good news story that I picked up on earlier on in the presentation was around routine capital and what's happening with routine capital. I said that a few years back, routine capital was $500,000 a year, and now we're getting $25 million a year from provincial government from routine capital. Do you know how that came about? That came about as a result of a joint effort to push from the student side, a push from the administration, and I think between both the groups raising the importance of it, it made a difference. And certainly, when we're looking at some of the challenges we're facing, your voice is important as well. The last comment, and sorry, I did see a hand up, is when you're looking at international students, and yes, we're talking about the burden we're placing on them. But one of the things that we also do need to acknowledge is that, just looking at what's gone on in Surrey over the past couple of years, the provincial government has put $126 million of the fixed infrastructure in place to support not only domestic students, but international students. And if you look at the Burnaby campus, all funded through public taxpayer money, a significant contribution. And that's a piece that we do look at when we look at international students to make sure that we're covering off and capturing as well. Sympathetic to you guys.
Do you mind just responding to my second question about, is this the plan every year to keep increasing tuition to the maximum amount?
Well, I think what we did is we put up the slide that shows what our future intentions are the 3 other years.
Slide 6.
So yes or
In
no?
reactivating.
So this is the proposal, and it's basically the current discussion that we just talked about, putting the numbers up and showing the impacts of how it's going to play out through the future.
I'm not the best with graphs. Is that yes, we're going to increase the maximum amount every year, or that graph isn't making sense to me, or that's
It's a yes or no question.
It was a yes or no question. Wait, do you want to explain what the tuition mechanics are? First of all, there is no maximum. It could go as high as
Isn't it
Well,
2%?
the domestic, so at the moment the domestic tuition is the government says that we can't increase it by more than 2%. As Martin pointed out, inflation is 4 to 6%. So I think if you want a hard yes or no, I think the answer is yes.
absolutely.
The other thing I really like what you said a minute ago when you said, what can we at SFU do? And I want to give you another example. Student housing is a big challenge, and we would like to build more student housing. And what is not known to many of you probably is that the provincial government doesn't allow the university to take out a loan to build housing. Because if you think about it, it's a no-brainer. You take out a loan, you take out a mortgage, you build the housing. You have rent coming in, and then you pay back the mortgage. The provincial government did not allow that because that turns out to be a deficit on their books, and they didn't want that. And so it took all of us, it took you and us together to lobby the government to say, look, what are we not getting? And the government is now beginning to talk about relaxing that, and that took a joint effort from all of us. So kudos there.
Hi. So I wanted to speak to a few things, and I want to start off with what Martin, you expressed about how you have sympathy for the difficulty of where we come from, and I want to highlight to everyone in this room that according to the 2017-2018 administrative compensation numbers, your salary was $318,000 and $918, and with 12,000 plus in expenses. So let's all highlight, let's all understand how much the administration makes in terms of salaries and expenses and benefits, okay? That's something that was left out of this presentation, and that needs to be made clear. The huge disconnection between, these strain you talk about and, saying that you understand where we come from. Like, the whole university needs to know how much the administration makes. And so we've calculated it's about $7 million, the top administration. That's how much you make, and that's approximately how much that would be made from these tuition increases. So let's not hide that. You need to, it's not enough to just say you understand, but you need to look at us in our faces. You need to see how we live. You need to talk to these students and look at how we work full-time, go to school full-time, that strain you make. And it's not enough. It's not enough to say you understand and your hands are tied. It's not enough. You have when you say that financial aid available, but we need to look at the realities, not just on numbers. We need to look at the reality of how difficult it is to receive financial aid, especially if students are already killing themselves working, then they're not eligible for financial aid. Let's look at the realities. Is the financial aid kept in line with the increases? Let's look at that.
I was too poor to get financial aid. I don't think the system that does that calculation understood or maybe thought I was lying, because everything was zero and I couldn't get financial aid. This is something that you're passing on to a system, but it isn't translating into the people. Right?
So I just as a final statement, if you're looking for a place where you can create efficiencies or where you can receive some more income, let's not aim to receive that from the backs of students who are already burdened, but maybe we can look at the administrative salaries, because we think there are a lot of efficiencies that can be addressed right now.
I reply to that first, Martin, and if you were to say anything else, I'll say two things. And Martin never thought he would hear me say this, because as a vice president academic, you appreciate that one of my duties is to fight for as much money as possible, going to the academic side of the house to hire professors and teaching assistants and to keep the research mission going. But actually, if you look at all the metrics, SFU has amongst the lowest, if not the lowest, administrative cost of all universities in Canada. So there's always room for more.
7 million.
So that was the first thing. So the second thing, I encourage you to Google in British Columbia executive compensation freezes for executives.
But it's already bad. The few 133,000, you're getting some of the people getting more than the Prime Minister of Canada. Come on. What's happening?
We're not going to cry.
Bro, you are under financial stress? No. Come on.
Hi, my name is Ben Lawton. I'm a fourth-year political science student. I'm president of Generation Screwed SFU. So I'm not exactly opposed to price increases just on principle. And in fact, I don't really have a problem with you guys increasing the rates for international students. The families don't pay taxes here. It's not up to us to subsidize their education. They can pay the market price. I get that part of it. I also understand the concept that their higher tuition rates are supposed to, in theory, this is the way it's supposed to work, subsidize domestic students. I understand that, but when you look at the massive increases on international students, where does that put your incentives? It puts your incentives as a public institution paid for predominantly by taxpayers, including domestic students, to fish around for the highest bidder in the international school market and sell out our education to international students. There is a cost to stuffing our classrooms and our auditoriums with, frankly, I hate to say it, illiterate and unmotivated.
No one who gets into this university is illiterate.
So,
Get out of here with your racism. That's racism.
Take it somewhere else.
It takes a cost. It takes a
Get out of
cost.
here.
Am I going to speak? I didn't
No,
say
you're not
anything
going to
racist
speak
at all.
with your discrimination
It's not.
and your bias and your racism.
Well,
That's
that's
disgusting.
I didn't
Go
say
get an
anything
education.
racist.
Get an
I don't think the
education,
university
get
lets
out.
illiterate people in.
So-
I teach first-year
That
classes.
is
None of them are illiterate.
It has a huge
That is
impact.
disgusting.
Again,
You
am I
are
going
not
to
going to let
talk
me
or
talk.
what?
You're not going to talk. I'm not going to let you say another word.
This is an issue
You
that
just
is.
referred to fellow students as illiterate? Are you kidding me? Do you have any sort of
So-
global
okay,
history
so
knowledge?
obviously-
Can I ask for a time out for a
This is
second?
how the opposition works.
Whoa.
But
Can
I
ask
have
time-
raised-
just time out for a second.
That's
Listen, both sides. Just for a quick, I think.
Disgusting and offensive.
Facts
No,
don't care about your feelings. I'm
Get
talking
out.
about serious problems that a lot of students come
Disgusting
in
and
with.
offensive.
So
Disgusting
I
and
think we're here to discuss the budget for 2019, and I think I
What
want
I'm
to
saying is
ask
how
that we, I would like to
reliant are
ask
you?
that we keep the conversation.
On international fees, you should
Disgusting
look
and
at your
offensive.
requirements.
Disgusting and offensive. I'm
You
not
should
going to
look
let
at
you
your
speak for as
requirements.
long as you're saying
This
So,
is
excuse me,
your dialogue.
I think shouting over.
xenophobic,
this is allowed, like,
Yeah, I think actually
This is
there's
like
a general
regular
consensus on
conversation.
this. You're not gonna sit here and talk bad about international
is a
students just because of where they're
Okay,
from.
I think we've heard your point. I think
But
also
you have it, because it comes down to the finances. You're selling out our education, and you're making sure that the
You're
vast
selling out
majority of your
integrity with
your
your gross
revenues
racist,
are coming
xenophobic,
from
nationalist,
international students.
disgusting
So
gross views.
I think we've heard your point. I
Where's
think
that
also
put you
please
as an
let us not shout.
Yeah, don't
I will
over
civil.
shout when
Don't
there
civilize
is
here.
discriminatory.
Oh my God.
Can we take some questions?
Can you be civil while you tell us we're illiterate for coming to university?
Okay.
No, I'm saying that.
Are there any other questions?
Ignorance.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
So,
Fact.
Okay, I think we're moving on to the next question.
Well, because you can't answer the question though. I'm asking you, your revenues are heavily dependent on this inflated price of students you're bringing in. And I don't think that you're accounting for that. I'm seeing a lot of more money being spent on the administration. I'm not seeing the cuts to your own pensions and your own salaries. And it's quite evident that you're using international students as a cash cow. And you don't care about the cost or the effects it has on your own accounting.
So the one thing I would say is that we are actually serving more domestic undergrad students than the provincial government is paying out for. And SFU serves the largest number above the target of all the universities and colleges in British Columbia.
My second question is regarding the 25% that's paid out
You-
for services.
you've had enough
How
airtime.
do you know
You've had
that
enough airtime.
you spoke for literally like half an hour?
Yes, and I
It's
spoke
like,
way better
and
than
you
you.
couldn't even stop talking either. That's the other problem. And so with the 25% of those
relax,
services,
Yeah,
how much
that's
of
done.
those, how much of those
That's
services do you know?
Let's
are
be
affected?
respectful to each other and let everybody have a voice.
Do you know that those 25% of their revenue that goes back into services for them, do you know if those are effective or not? Are they actually indeed helping them? Or are you just building more and more jobs for university administrative staff at our expense?
So these 25% go into English language support. They go into academic
interesting.
advising.
I thought, oh, wait a
They
minute.
go into health and wellness. They go into helping with international visas. What am I? Scholarships. We're talking about bursaries and scholarships.
And are they? Do you know if they're helping the students, or are you just dragging them along to make your quotas and make your paycheck?
I don't think SFU is in the business of dragging students along. We monitor and we assess all our investments. So was there? Yeah.
I want to say, from the perspective of the Dean of Graduate School, Dean of Graduates and Postdoctoral Studies, how much we value international students for what they bring to the university in terms of their research, in terms of the progressive globalization that they bring, and from the position of a humanist university that was started in the 1960s to open access for both domestic and international students. So I will say I didn't advocate hard enough to have a freeze on tuition fees for graduate students, but please notice that international graduate students are not getting a fee increase above 13%. Please notice that we have a fee waiver for international graduate students who are applying from the countries that are affected by the Trump travel ban. I just had an email from people to women from Iran yesterday. And please notice it's small, but I have to say I'm proud of it that we've increased the number of refugee students at the international graduate level. We can't stress enough what the international graduate students bring to the university. I don't see a split between them and the domestic students. In fact, coming from my own studies in globalization and from my understanding of the university, this kind of strong multiculturalism is exactly the thing that we need in the world right now.
Thank you, Jeff. Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies. 1, 2, 3.
Thanks.
So, you gotta give it back though. Sure. So thanks for consulting with us this morning, although I think it was a bad choice of timing right in the middle of midterms. That might have driven down. So, I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but you know, I'll have some good faith. Anyway, so I've noticed, the tuition hikes have been ongoing for many years, and I noticed that if you go back to the old emails, the old messages sent, it's usually a similar story to what you've given us today, which is the budget is in trouble, we have to find some extra revenue source, costs are going up, this and that. And then every time I go and I look through the financial reports, there's a surplus and some contributions to the endowment. increasing operating costs. I think last year, the 27-2018 budget shows a $65 million surplus, right? And now about half of that was, I think, tangible capital assets. So even assuming those were really necessary and important, you're still left with $30 million, which I notice is about 3 times the prospective tuition hikes, right? So I'm wondering here, right, you know, every year the budget's in trouble, and then we find out there's a huge contribution to the endowment. I mean, is the purpose of a university to just keep piling up the endowment money, or is it to educate students as cheaply as possible, as effectively as possible? And I'm just seeing this really big discrepancy. Are we going to come back and next year and find out, oh, actually, we need the high tuition, but also we have another $65 million to it? I mean, how would you guys respond to that?
Sure, first of all, congratulations. I think you did some great research and you picked, no, seriously, you've done great research and picked up on a couple of key themes for us. I must admit at the end of last year I was horrified when I saw the number on the bottom line. We had carry forwards in key areas. We had unfilled faculty positions, and something Peter and I have spent a lot of time trying to along the way. Because we did have a number of unfilled positions, and it did result in a surplus larger on the bottom line than we thought we should have. And that's a detriment. We want to put the resources in the classroom. I don't want to build the bank up. I get no bonus if we turn a profit at the end of the year. The one area that you rightfully did highlight, we do actually drop a profit to the bottom line, is for capital expenditures. The way it works, if we want to spend money on capital, we have to run a profit and then we invest it into capital. But it has to go through the bottom line as a profit to start with. But having said that, yeah, no, absolutely, it's something we're trying to address.
Just a really brief follow-up here. So it seems like you have this financial room, so you can choose to have more capital expenses, you can choose to hire more faculty, or you can choose to freeze tuition. Why not the latter?
So,
just I'll turn it over to Peter, but be mindful that a big part of our commitments on the capital front, as I said, we get $25 million from the provincial government, but we're also required to put a 25% match on top of that. So we have to find the money, we have to put it into the mix, and you know, we can turn down the 25 million and not match it if that's our desire. Same thing with the student residences. Obviously, there's money that we have to find in finance. And at times we have capital shortfalls, such as the SC3 we're building out in Surrey that we have to finance. So there's some things that I would say, you know, okay, in go-forward basis, maybe we do have some discretion on, but we've also got some solid commitments that we have to fund against too.
So carry forwards is a complicated subject, and just to know there are liabilities and commitments against carry forwards. So for example, where we do have faculty vacancies arising, we will try and replace those faculties with new faculty lines, but it might take a year, even 2 years. It's a competitive market, so you don't always find the best faculty immediately, so then the money sits there for a while. And so startup grants, faculty receive startup grants and professional development money, and they don't spend that necessarily in the fiscal year that it was given to them, and so then it carries forward the next year, but there's a commitment against that, and that's a commitment we can't take away, and we shouldn't take away.
The pattern has went back several years though, so this is not just a 1 or 2, you know, this, you go through the finance, there's a lot of surpluses, so.
It's in the state.
We don't need the mic, it's okay.
Well, it's being taped, so.
Okay. Sorry.
Good day, everybody. My name is Giovanni Hassan from the Simon Fraser Students of Caribbean and African Ancestry. I just wanted to highlight a few things here. Over the last 10 years, 44,901 international students from 192 countries, around 50 from African and Caribbean countries. There is nothing on this campus that is specifically catered to the needs of that community on this campus. The only space that we have is soda, and right now we are finding difficult to even keep that space on campus. The student society has gone rogue, evicting the black students. There's problem with Women's Center in terms of their services. There's problem with out on campus being closed. There's First Nation students talking about the fact that they have been constrained. We come to SFU for protection. We come to SFU for services. There's nothing from SFU to protect, and there's silence from SFU. And what we have done is just, oh, I'm going to back up, this is student politics, when we're talking about the human rights of people. And on top of that, being silent, the university is putting a 20% increase on international students. that is very wrong. And in September 29, 2016, SFU committed to never to increase for international students to 2 times the domestic general increase. What I'm seeing is a common tactic by an institution to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So you see this brother come and say, hey, international students this, international students, when we should be acting together, because together we stand as one. And you should, one, freeze tuition now, and secondly, push for the provincial government to have some kind of cap on increases. And you should not be using these caps as an excuse to keep compounding interest, because that adds up, and it hurts us. We can't continue to do this. Freeze tuition, no. It's wrong.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is George Campbell. I'm a 50 PhD student in American English. I find it interesting that here I see 2 administrators talking about inflation rates at the university being between 4 and 6%, when we bargain with your teaching assistants, sessional instructors, and language instructors at the table, you tell us that the inflation rate is between 2 and 3%. I find it interesting that the difference you cite in inflation rates hasn't appealed to graduate students who are still making approximately $20,000, the same amount of income they were making 10 years ago. While tuition fees have gone up how many times?
140%.
Oh, nice. I find it extremely disturbing that you would use the $25 million provincial funding requirement of adding 25% from the university's own budget as a reason to explain why you need to increase tuition and why your surplus is somehow not eligible for being, like your budget can't be altered so that your surplus is covering this much needed extra $8 to $14 million you have to take out of student fees. I guess my question is, like, how do you justify using 2 different numbers to debate with the same people in 2 different contexts? One context where you won't raise their wages, and the other context where you tell them you're going to take more of their tuition. I have always, at every year I've been at this university, seen a decrease year over year in my pay relative to my tuition. Every year. How do you justify that?
Student is not a capital.
Certainly, and I won't get into collective bargaining here. I think that's there are tables for that, and people that do collective bargaining. But be mindful.
Isn't that in your portfolio?
Sorry?
Isn't that in your portfolio?
For the staff people, it is, yes, absolutely. So when we do collective bargaining and we look at it, there's a couple of components around the wages. The first is the general wage increase, which is the 2%, which I think you're referencing. But be mindful in a lot of the contracts that we have in place, with step increases for staff members as well, whereas they progress through the ranks, there's step increases that they also get, which causes inflation. And certainly, as Peter's referenced, when we get out and we're trying to attract faculty, we have a two-pronged problem. One is that we can't hire them, which drives unspent money and builds up the surplus. But to recruit those new faculty members, we actually have to pay more in certain faculties and for certain disciplines that are in high demand, and that does drive inflation for sure. Sorry, was that a follow-up?
Yeah, over the last 5 years, our wage increases weren't 2% a year. They were 0, 1, 0.5, and 1.5 for a total of 5.5% over 5 years. Yeah.
Can I get an answer to my question, please, in terms of how do we trust the university after you specifically say that you will not increase international undergrad rate by more than 2 times the general domestic increase? That was literally said in the September 29, 2016 email. So I went back and I saw that. How is that?
So I think you're referring to the grandparenting clause, which they have explained, which is to say that for ongoing...
No, you said
Sorry?
In the email it said, I'm just talking about email, I don't know what is grandparenting clause. I saw an email that specifically states that you won't increase international student fees by more than 2 times the domestic general increase.
For all continuing international.
It did not say continuing,
students.
sir. It said
Well,
international.
that's been our message. So I'm not sure which email you were referring to, and who sent that email about that. It's been a very consistent message of ours. And actually, I think SFU is pretty unique in that.
Certainly fire us an email.
If that's not the email, we'll, we can respond to that. Lady next to you, I think, had a question.
No answer for mine?
Sorry.
I thought we just.
Okay.
Well, we got.
Hi, my name is Jade Ho. I'm an international student and PhD candidate in education. I'm not very good at numbers, but I do want to say that as an educator, I get really cringed when we are in this kind of budget consultation because education is talked about like a product, like a commodity. Education shouldn't be a commodity, and I just want to urge the university to continue to think on that. Like, why are people here? Like, we are not here to pay for a service. We are here to get an education. So I just want to put that point forward. And I also want to say that the consultation today take on unceded indigenous territory. I think when we do this kind of budget consultation, we need to especially recognize that we are on stolen lands and we are continuing to charge our indigenous students with tuitions that many cannot afford. So I just want to put that 2 point forward and would like to hear if you have any reflection on that.
Thank you for acknowledging the unceded territories. That's appropriate and correct. I guess on the one hand, I hear you, but the bottom line is I'm not sure how one would be able to deliver the education, without the resources to do that. So that is our challenge.
But he just pointed out that you do have the resources to do it, though. That's the point. Like we need to stop acting as if we are heavenly and glorious in asking students for more money, because it's untrue. And even you talk about the email, it says for new international undergrad students and for existing international students, double the general fee increase with a commitment that subsequent increases will be double the domestic general fee increase. In 2016, you increased it by 8%, and then you said all subsequent tuition fee increases will be double the domestic general fee increase.
So the key word here is existing.
For both incoming and existing. That's what the email said in September 29, 2017.
So if you could email that to us, I can read this. I think there was a...
Hi, my name is Paul. I'm on the men's football team at SFU, and I'm also the vice president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which is an elected group representing 300 student athletes on campus. And many of the student athletes on campus compete in the NCAA Division II, which is in the United States. And over 50% of student athletes are actually international students, whether they be from the United States or other parts of the world. And so these proposed increases to tuition will heavily affect student athletes, especially international student athletes, putting them at a disadvantage and actually increasing existing disadvantage. And this will especially affect recruiting for all sports athletics events on campus, as many international students want to study business, engineering, sciences, and these tuition increases by 20%, 16% will make it actually worse for them to come to some SFU versus other schools where they're from in their states or other countries. And so I guess from an athletic standpoint of view, I have two questions. The first is, what can the SFU athletic, but SFU general offer athletics in terms of tuition waivers for student athletes who cannot go get jobs to pay off the difference, who are sometimes ineligible for certain grants and bursaries that other students are afforded just because of their NCAA standing? And my second question is this tuition increase worth having not only student athletes, but all international students or other students consider leaving the university because they can no longer afford it?
Full-time for athletics, waive the tuition.
So you bring up an interesting point about where we compete, and in the United States, of course, the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuitions is something we could talk about. Also, we hear you, we hear this conversation, but you also have to look at the bigger picture. You have to look at UBC, you have to look at the other universities in Canada and how we place relative to those. And relative to those, I think we place pretty much exactly where we should place according to all other rankings. Now, that is not to say that there shouldn't be a provincial and a national discussion about the funding of education, and we hear all of you on that. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact where SFU places relative to the rest of the universities.
Just further that.
Just to further that, a student athlete in season is dedicating between 10 to 12 hours, potentially a day, to their athletic event, whether it be football, basketball, wrestling, any sort of sport. And so during the season, students are not eligible to get work, and by NCAA bylaws, they are not allowed to receive certain types of grants and certain bursaries from the school or other out-of-school companies or endowments or whatever. But out-of-season student athletes are available, but are also restricted to the amount of time they can work and the amount of income they can make. And so, on behalf of student athletes, we're just wondering, this increase in tuition will greatly affect all student athletes. And so, what can be done for us, especially since we are at a certain point put at more of a disadvantage than any other student on campus because we've chosen to play a sport and represent SFU across the United States. And as in the men's soccer team, for example, they're #1 in all of NCAA Division II, and they rely heavily on international students, and they also are put at a disadvantage by these tuition increases. And they represent SFU greatly across the United States and worldwide.
Yeah, but there's a response for him or not?
No response to that question?
Yeah, that's what can be done specifically.
So I hear you, I acknowledge you. I don't have an answer today.
What about a
just
ranking?
verbalize it so that we can know explicitly.
Yeah, you recognize the question.
Okay, so going back to the slide where you have all of the other schools, first of all, you kind of rationalize SFU's tuition against the objectively exorbitant fees charged by UBC and U of T. So first of all, I think that really is any indication of what a reasonable amount of tuition to pay is, considering how much they charge. Second of all, you keep talking about you have to consider us against the average. So like, what's the average tuition that people are paying? So what we want to know is, does SFU consider themselves to be average? Are we attending an average institution? Is your leadership average? And if not, why is SFU comparing themselves with the average? Would you not like to strive to be better than that? And would that not involve some kind of affordability so that best students can make the choice to come here?
Progressive, engaged university.
That's a clever one. So I'm not going to comment on my own performance or whether I'm above or below average. I don't think Mark wants to go there either. So what is, is it better to have tuition above average, have tuition below average? I think we all agree that to have tuition below average would be the preferred outcome. The reality is what it is. I personally have chosen to come to SFU because I believe in the mission and the vision and the spirit of SFU, and I personally do not think of SFU as average. I can assure you of that. And I don't think you would, because I think you've chosen to come to SFU for a good reason. There's a new voice here.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm a fourth-year international studies student, and I'm the VP of Finances for the International Studies Students Association. We recently released a survey among our IS students, student body, that asked themselves what they thought about the proposed tuition hikes. I just wanted to add on to what this gentleman mentioned earlier about your commitment towards filling these unfilled positions in dealing with that gap in the surplus from the 2017-2018 financial report. Among a trend among all of our responses, a lot of the students mentioned a growing concern, and they're confused with the trend they see in SFU hiring a lot more sessional instructors and professors rather than regular faculty. So I guess my question is to you guys is, do you guys see is this an actual trend in SFU hiring more sessional instructors than actual permanent positions for professors and faculty, or is there any other thoughts you have on that?
I'll take that one. So absolutely not. I think, first of all, I would acknowledge that our session instructors do an amazing job and are fantastic instructors. So I would not want to in any way sort of refer to them as different in teaching capacity from regular faculty. But we are committed to hiring regular, ongoing faculty who participate not only in the teaching but in the research mission and who are regular, ongoing members of our community. And that number is steady, and we're working hard on growing that number.
I also agree that they're awesome, especially since most of my professors that are teaching me this semester are sessional instructors, and the other professor that's teaching me is on a limited term position. So.
When you haven't had it.
Do you want to say something?
Hey, sorry, I'm Seamus Gregor. I'm a second-year MA student in the School of Communication. I also did my undergrad here in the School of Communication. The first thing I wanted to say is I found a lot of your answers today quite insufficient. You kind of skipped over a lot of them. You haven't addressed people's like Georgie's, Giovanni's, Jay's, my friend over there from the students from the athletics. But I wanted to return to what Matt was talking about earlier in the surplus. I found your answer, you were very vague. Sorry, yours in particular. You mentioned things, you mentioned steps that you were going to be doing to address the surplus. I wanted you to answer that again more clearly, the things that you were going to be prioritizing over giving your students tuition relief. I want you to return to Matt's question, please.
Sure, so just as I think I said, but if I didn't, I'll repeat it. But surpluses on our bottom line, I think, are there for two reasons. One is intentional, to fund capital, and I think that it ties into the question that's being asked to the fellow to your right. But if we do want to fund capital, it actually goes through the financial statements as a surplus first, and then it is spent on capital. So we are actually using our surplus to fund capital in certain cases. I mentioned the 25% match on routine capital. That is surplus that goes to the bottom line, and we use it to fund routine capital. We also, with some of our larger projects, we have what I would say are funding gaps on it. We've got a tremendous contribution from the provincial government in Surrey to fund a new building. There's a little bit of a shortfall. We're using some capital funding to fund that. It's very deliberate, and yes, it is going through to the bottom line. The second piece that is not delivered is I would say, the build-up of the carry-forwards, which is basically unspent funds. And that is very much a concern that I have. It's one that Peter has. And really what the carry-forward is being driven by is unfilled faculty positions in a lot of cases in the faculties. And certainly, I think that we can all agree that the best thing that we can do is actually hire the faculty, fill the positions, and spend that money, put it into the classrooms.
$30 million worth of faculty?
No. It's not $30 million. But on the replacing faculty, just to explain that a little bit further. So there are times when you have faculty resigning because they offer some other universities. There are retirements, and there is a gap between advertising and replacing those faculty and deciding where those faculty lines are going to go. And what we are finding in a very, very, very competitive market is that we are often not securing faculty lines first time around because SFU has very, very high standards and very high expectations, and we look for the best. And if we're not satisfied 1 year that we've found the right person, then we will hire again next year. I think the new voice there, I'll go back to you.
Hi everybody, my name is Vinicius. I'm an international student. I'm a PhD student, and I also live in the residence, the SFU residence at downtown. You talk about the residence that you are trying to build more, so new students can have some place to live correctly. But there's quite a problem because, we have to pay the whole term in advance together with our tuition. So then we just receive bi-weekly. And doing the calculations, by the second Friday of the term, SFU already had 80–90% of the money that we will get by the end of the term. So I would like to know what are you going to do about that, because we are paying $6,000 in advance to you, and before we even get paid, and we have to survive. We have to eat the whole term, and with money that you already got from us.
I must say on that, I don't know the inner workings of how we actually bill students. I'm happy to take that one offline and have a discussion with you. I understand the hardship, obviously, of an upfront payment and the money coming in over time. I'm certainly happy to take that offline as a specific example.
Does it have to be on?
It doesn't have to be.
Applies to many students.
So we are all affected.
We are all
By 29th,
affected.
I have to pay for next semester's accommodation. So we are all affected. It can't be offline.
Okay, well, I think what I would say then is we're happy to take the question and respond back to it. I mean, I don't have the answer in my hands. I don't know. Certainly, the residents and housing folks would have to be part of that discussion. Sorry, which...
No, I think... Well, we have to remember that this is a consultation too, right? So decisions aren't made already, right?
No.
Okay.
The microphone's going around.
No, I was wondering if the tuition decision hasn't been made already, because this is a consultation, right?
So ultimately, the tuition discussion goes to the board. We take the community feedback. We have that conversation with our board, and the board's the ones that actually decide to approve or not.
And where does that happen?
It happens in March timeframe. We actually had gotten to the last slide, which we kind of stopped taking.
Do you want us to just do the last 2 slides, then you can see where...
Afterwards.
Okay.
All right, so I'm Derek. I started as an SFU student way back in 2001 in engineering, paying $70 a credit hour. I came here because it was an affordable place to come, and I was the first person in my family to ever go to university. Now that same program costs $210 a credit hour already, or even more, I guess $600–700 for an international student. That's completely changed the whole context of what people can afford and what they can do. So I actually have a couple of questions specifically about some budget line items. So I did look through the 2017-2018 budget versus actuals. There's 2 lines that are underspent. One of them is employee benefits, and the other one is scholarship and tuition. Employee benefits by around $4 million, scholarships and tuition by around $700,000 from what I read of that. And then 2 that appear to be overspent. One is contracted services by around $4 million, and the other one is travel, which by $700,000. So that, I think, gives sort of a snapshot of some of the priorities. So, I think when you talk about efficiencies, you need to start looking at what are those contracted services, what's going over there for those contractors, and what's going over in travel. Now, the other thing we've heard is that one of the drivers of costs is we need to pay faculty more because housing is so affordable here. That's really about the story that's going on here. Housing is ridiculous. SFU did build one building, Verdant, in about 2006. That was affordable, that was subsidized for staff and faculty. It hasn't built any since then, and there's now many hundreds of persons wait list. So one way to look at what you're actually saying about dollars and cents is that we have a housing problem, and rather than build affordable housing up here for faculty and staff so we can recruit them, which we can't do because there's all this space over there that's being sold off to developers, We are instead going to take the money from international students to cover that hole by paying people more so they can live off campus. Why not actually invest in affordable housing up here? Why not stop the sell-off of our land up here and do what other universities have done?
Well, thank you. You've certainly hit one of the major issues that we do face in recruiting. It's not finalized at this point, but I can tell you that we're in active discussions with the SFU Community Trust. We have 2 remaining parcels that need to be developed, and we're in discussions with them of repeating model, whether it's the Burnt Pond model or another model that will provide opportunities for lower cost housing for staff and faculty members. So that's certainly something we're doing.
Yeah, Peter asked me to speak to the scholarship fund, and I'll help out Jeff on this one. The $700K is an issue that comes forward because we're funded on a fiscal year basis, but many of our scholarships run on an academic year basis. So it's just forward money that's owed to students in the semester that's forthcoming.
No, I don't think any of my.
I think you were recording this.
Oh, you might for reports.
So I appreciated both the shout out for sexual instructors from a fellow international student. I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm also an international student.
International studies.
International studies, my fault. I can't hear. I appreciated the shout out for sexual instructors, and I also appreciated, Peter, what you said, the way that you value sexual instructors and the way that they contribute to the community. I was just wondering if you're having issues filling those faculty positions, and you have people who've taught here for up to, I believe, 25 years on a term-to-term contract basis as sexual instructors that you've said you value, all the while paying them less than 1/2 of what you would pay a faculty member for similar duties. Is there a way that those faculty gaps can be filled by changing some of these people who've already given over a decade of their lives to the university into faculty positions? Is there any problems recruiting? And so we can back up that talk of valuing sexual instructors with, like things that will allow them to afford healthcare and housing so that they're not applying to the food bank between their 3 classes each term.
So I think that's a valid point, and actually there are situations where we're doing exactly that.
Interesting.
Like for example, on anyone being changed into regular faculty positions.
So I can't give you the specific names, but we are doing that, yes, and
Because you know the people in the room that are here are the people who bargained that contract that allowed that transfer from sexual instructor to faculty member, and everyone on the administration side fought it the entire time, and have since we've got that language, continued to fight it by blocking appointments for those same people that you say you value. Every time.
So I think this, yeah, I guess you guys want to finish up soon.
No, keep the consultation.
I do appreciate you coming here, but I really get the feeling that even if this was a room full of Socrates, right, we wouldn't be able to convince you to change your course. Right? Your minds are mostly set. You're going to bring this to the board and discuss and say, okay, we want to do what we wanted to do before. So I think we've made it clear that you do have the financial room, you have options. You can at least bargain with us. Because I think ultimately this is a political thing, right? This is about, which students get which resources. Does the administration get resources? Where do the university's resources get directed? It is not a open and shut case with the budget. So, on behalf of a lot of people here, I'd like to say that I think we're going to try to fight you over this, right? Because you do have options. We know you have options. And this isn't just you're going to take it to the board and say, okay, it's signed off on. I mean, we really think you should reconsider. We think this is very unreasonable. It's very unjust. Puts a lot of financial and mental health stresses on a lot of students. I mean, we have a mental health crisis here. You gave us an app. Right?
It asked me if I'm lonely.
An app is not a very good doctor, and what you're doing is really, increasing those stresses with these tuition hikes. So yeah, I mean, this is the bottom line for me. I think you have options, and we're going to try and make you prove that.
That's right. Yeah. Students, we're gonna just go.
response to one of the points. We do go out, we talk to the community, we have a lot of discussions with the community, and you know, if we didn't take the input and use it, it would be, I don't think, a worthwhile process. We talked about grandfathering of tuition increases. I can tell you that that actually arose out of a community discussion, and that wasn't our original tack several years ago when we were actually proposing increasing international tuition. But the feedback from the community is, how can you bring students in? How can you then increase their salaries after, or their tuitions after that? And in response to that, we did adapt our model. We went down the grandfathering path. Certainly, you've given us a lot to think about here today. It's a valuable input. You know, as much as I don't like, you know, the uncomfortable situation of answering the types of questions you're posing, this is a valuable process, and it's one that does cause the university to go back and reflect and look at it. You know, if there are other options, then certainly we need to consider them, and I think you're bang on with that. Just mindful of the time too. Is everybody good? And we're running a little bit over. Okay, fair enough. Okay. Sure.
I just want to make another comment, since we're still on this slide, that you made a lot of comparison with other universities. I want to make 2 points. Just be mindful in the future when you do this kind of consultation. First, doesn't matter how you compare with other universities, our reality stays the same. We can't afford tuition. We can't even afford to live in Vancouver. So just be mindful of that. Second, this actually shows across the board in our province and in Canada and worldwide that it's a problem. Education are being sold out. So don't use this as an excuse to tell us that, well, we're actually doing great. We are really not, across the board. With UBC, with UVic, all the other universities. But I feel like SFU is actually in a unique situation where the leadership can do something. The leadership can stand with the students. So I would like to hear you commit today that you will stand with the student, push the province to put a tuition freeze on international students, as well as the domestic student.
Yeah.
Can you promise that today?
Would you be willing to push the provincial government to put similar caps or to
students?
For just like how you have domestic international domestic fees increase cap, would you as a university leadership, because you're a progressive university, be willing to push for a similar cap for international students? Are you progressive?
So I can't make you that promise as you asked it today, but I can tell you that we've given examples early on where we have worked together with the student body to make positions to the government, whether that's about covering the maintenance and basically repairs to our campus, or whether that's about student housing. And we are committed to having conversations with the provincial government, and I hope that you are committed to having conversations with the provincial and the federal government. And we hear you.
So what do you need from us? How do we move forward? How do we move forward together instead of like us versus you? Because this place is important to me, and I don't want to be at odds with the administration. So who's going to organize that? Who can we contact after this, and what do we do?
Do you want to? Sorry.
You want to? Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. I think what Aaron is saying, that Aaron is willing to have that conversation with you, but not what the next steps are. Does everybody know Aaron? Yeah. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Erin Middlecombe, and I work in the Vice Provost Students and International Office. And we had chatted prior to the beginning of this session that I'd be happy to be the point of contact moving forward with students who have remaining questions. And I could work with my colleagues to try and get the answers to the questions you have.
There's only one SFU member here.
Hello everyone. So I first want to thanks to every fellow student here who has brought up every issue, especially the most recent one in regards about how SFU is like, are SFU ever going to be planning to fight for provincial funding for internationals just to make it as someone has said, just and fair. But I also want to ask and maybe bring up the issue of your expenses. And I want to quote back, because my dad actually studied here 30 years ago. One of the main issues he had with with SFU, and I find it kind of disturbing, is that SFU has been wasting our money on every little bits of way that they can. For example, they threw out furniture, good, proper working furniture that just for no good reason. And in fact, I have one at my home, just for the sake of recycling here. And I believe this practice and this act is still happening on today, even though it may not seem as obvious. So I may just want to bring up to your attention, just maybe cut down on your expenses, such as like wasteful expenses such as like that. And also going back on, I believe either Martin or Peter brought up that they are unwilling to cut down on any expenses of our precious services. As much as I would want to say yes, I would agree to that. I would want to say please look into certain services that you can cut back down, because as we all know, inflation, it's inevitable, unfortunately, and I do appreciate and I do understand, being an economics student, that price tuition hiking is kind of inevitable. But please cap it down and don't make it hard on us. Thank you.
The cost doesn't increase year over year by 10%. That's the problem, right?
So again, Martin will be aghast that I mentioned it twice in one morning. SFU does have a reputation as having one of the lowest administrative overheads of universities. And also, consultation is very important to both of us, I think, because it's important to all of us. It is us hearing you, it is you hearing us, and it's then one of the things we shared with you this morning is that for fiscal 2019-20, we are looking at an approximately 1% sort of gap, which we are going to have to make up through finding efficiencies in the system.
Thank you for that segue, because I actually wanted to talk about the meaning of consultation. So Matt brought it up here, despite everything we're saying, despite all of our valid points, what's going to happen? Yes, you know what? Like what I may predict would happen is that the admin may very possibly pat themselves on the back for saying that they conducted this consultation, which I will say was also framed as an information session. But does that really mean anything? What does consultation really mean? I think a lot of us in the room are well aware of quote-unquote consultations that occur between, say, for example, the government and First Nations, but that doesn't mean that anything productive comes out of them. And so us as students uniting together, we're not going to let that slide. We're not going to, just say, oh, we did our best, we attended the consultation, our work is done, there's nothing else we can do. So I'm going to say, something that has come up in our planning for this event is that it's very unfortunate that students are not like the students in Quebec. That's a very big point. That, we talk about, how the prices here are more affordable than all these other universities. Let's think about Quebec. Let's think about how hard those students have fought, how they've gone on the street over every potential tuition increase, and now I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but they paid far, far, far less than us. So I just want to make this call right now as a fellow SFU student that this can change in BC. We can change the climate of student activism in BC, and we can make it so, we're not just going to rely on what happens in the board. We're going to continue to have this student resistance, because that's what makes change.
So just to remind you that this is not the only consultation session. So we're consulting with many of the other stakeholders, including stakeholders on Burnaby, in Surrey, in Vancouver, faculty, staff. So I think there's about 17 different.
That's not a bit high, but it's. Just like 100, about 12.
About 12 consultation sessions.
With students?
Well, they're open, students can come. This is designated students, but we have open ones in all 3 campuses.
One in Surrey, one in Vancouver, one in Burnaby.
Open to everybody.
Are those highly promoted?
And we've met the TSS executive already.
I just wanted to chime in a little bit here. I really appreciate some of the comments that my fellow students here have made. The SFS is also very concerned about these increases, and I think, speaking to some of your questions about what's the next steps here, we play an important role being that intermediary between the university and the student body. And we're looking very positively on doing extensive consultation with the student body about these increases beyond this and beyond what the university is doing, and using our platform to bring that forward. So you'll hear from us as hopefully a leadership body for the students in this push. We want to be able to be out there leading the charge as well. So just wanted to get that in there and say that please come to us and please bring your concerns to us too, because we're here fighting for you.
Are you fighting for them when you refuse to leave them space on campus? Is that real?
No, you're not. You're not.
Could you give some examples?
You're not. It's all words.
That will be on the floor. Activism.
So a really important point has managed to go without talking about. You mentioned that apparently people who are in engineering and business will make so much more money than us poor art students, which is quite unfortunate for us, and apparently they can pay more tuition because they're already making more money even though they haven't gotten that degree yet. I'm really confused about that justification. So 16%, we haven't heard. Where did this come from? What is 16%?
Actually 20.
Actually 20, yeah. All of us know this is ridiculous. Like, this is a ridiculously exorbitant price that we've never seen before. Are business students expected to make that much more money than the rest of us and be that much more productive, or was it just that the dean of business was never willing to sell out their own students?
Nah, sell out my friend then.
I'd like to say I get the tough ones, but one of the things you have to take note of here is that the actual increase in tuition is only on the business courses. I still recognize it's a high rate, but about 75% of the courses are in business. 25% of the courses would be taken somewhere else at the lower rate. So the net effect is about a 15% marginal rate of increase on it. If we look at other institutions, I mean, we can look across the road and see that they've gone up by 15, 15, and 10. We can look over at UVic, went up by 20. So the increase is not out of line with other ones, both in the province and in other areas. I recognize that any increase is not acceptable. These are the increases that seem to reflect a movement from our 11th and 12th place to our 9th place on there to match our rankings with what the percent increases would be.
What rankings?
The rankings on where we are as an institution and the ranking on where our tuition rate is relative to other universities.
Sorry, is there a linear relationship between the ranking and
So when our ranking drops, you'll make the fees cheaper?
Oh, so we should make a ranking drop there.
Oh, so I should stop doing my research because that'll get me like actual
What a beautiful
discount.
incentive.
Man, that's great. I had another question though, which would it's pretty easy one. Up there, you displayed a sampling of 25 Canadian universities, and you excluded all of the universities that would make your sample, the average drive down. There's a CBC report you can find from last year listing average yearly fees for students, undergraduates, between $6,000 and $7,000, with the highest average international student fees at $16,000. You sample 25 universities in Canada, exclude the ones with low tuition in Quebec, say they don't count because it's Quebec, and then tell us we should be happy that we're not UBC. Like, I know how to set up a conclusion by limiting the subjects of my research, and you just did that on your budget consultation. And you can thank my instructors who taught me how to consider the sources you use and the conclusions you reach, if you're wondering why I noticed that. But come on! Like, there are graduate students and undergraduate students in this room.
So I think in any analysis, state your assumptions, and I think we were honest with you to share with you what we did. We also shared the memorial stuff in there, which of course is very low. So we tried to be as honest with you as possible.
So you're honest about doing bad data. Bad methodology isn't better for being honest.
How do you choose the 25? Did you just pick comprehensive universities, or what are the 25? Where are they coming from?
So the table of the data actually, I believe, are is it on our website? Is that on IRTs? We can put it on the website. Yeah, I have the table right here with all the explanation, the footnotes, and everything. Okay, did you want us to actually finish the presentation because we had one or two more slides to go, just so you know next steps.
Sure, let's finish off the presentation.
And is this going to be available to all students, this presentation?
Yeah, it is on the web.
It's on the web.
Instead of PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I was looking for information about this consultation yesterday so that I could, talk to people, and I could not find anything. So just by the, if you're, there's no, it's not easily Googleable.
We'll try and find that and see what we can do. No, it's meant to be, for sure, absolutely. So the summary and resolution, I think we've talked about that. We're trying to find efficiency. We've heard, as I said earlier on in the session, certainly we had the discussion with the administrators. They expressed concerns over the efficiencies. We certainly heard loud and clear today about the concerns around the tuitions. At the end of the day, we have to sit down and find a way to make the piece work. Next steps. We are in the consultation process right now. We are gathering input. We are looking at different options to move forward. We'll have certainly conversations at the executive table. The way that the budget schedule works is it all works backwards from the April 1st date. April 1st is the start of our next fiscal year. Of course, we'd like to go into the next fiscal year with an improved budget. So the heavy discussions happen in March. We will be in front of our board. We'll have a detailed session with our board. We do talk about some of the choices we have, what we've heard in the community, and we have that discussion with our board at that time. Backing it up further, which is, I guess, part of what the community is all worried about, and particularly the administration side, is when we actually enter the budgets, and that will actually happen between November and January. So that is the more detailed work. We're still not at the detailed stage right now. We are putting the parameters in place, but the detailed budget gets approved in late March. I think we responded and asked questions, but so just one last time check, and maybe there's a couple more quick questions. We'll take those and go ahead.
So I heard during your presentation that you're interested in expanding housing on campus.
Yep.
Since I began here, you tore down the only affordable grad student and family housing, and you're now planning to replace it with undergraduate housing, which costs more than, I think between 2 and 3 times the rents on the Louis Riel house that you tore down. I also noticed that you said you're going to be able to recoup some of the costs of building because you're going to sell the buildings to private companies. So now we're doing public investment that results in a private profit so that a private company can, for the rest of time, profit off of students at SFU? Is that what I heard?
No, let me first of all talk about housing in general, what we're doing on that front. First of all, we have a 5-phase residential project, which we are kicking off right at this point. We're out to the market on tenders to do the first phase, 475 new beds. We have a second proposal in front of the provincial government for, I believe it's 350 beds, which we are hoping that the provincial government will provide debt room to allow us to build the second phase of the residential housing. Aside from that, we are also working with the SFU Community Trust with the goal of the next phase, I think is lot 21, putting 90 units of housing which is aimed at family type style people, so mature students with families, sort of condominium style, almost, I don't want to say a Louis Riel replacement because that isn't quite the right analogy, but it's certainly housing that's aimed at mature students with families. So I think that's good news. It's something that we're moving down the path on. Now, with regards to the financing piece of it, part of the challenge we've had on a go-forward basis is that we haven't been able to debt service. Building residences, is something that universities usually take on debt. Then what they do is pay the debt off over a period of time, 40 years or whatever is the life of the asset. We haven't been able to do that. The provincial government has introduced a new program. They're going to make $450 million worth of debt available across the whole sector. As I said, we're in an application for our phase 2. We have a request in that's in the $70 million range for the second phase of student residences. With the first phase, we're looking at creative ways of being able to build it. So the way that we've tried to build it is by basically self-finance it and then sell off the revenue stream over a long period of time to a private investor. The private investor, part of the deal and the discussion is that they would have to follow the university's tuition, or I should say rental or residence act in the way that they increase or change prices, so they can't go out just decide that you're going to jack the prices up to the roof. We have a policy in place as to how.
Like the university.
What's that?
Like the university.
Yeah, they can't do what the university's doing.
The university's already jacking up prices.
Sorry?
No, that's exactly what the university is doing though. They can't just jack up prices, but the university is doing it. So the university is the private
No, the
investor.
university can't do that actually. We actually do have to go through a process. We look at rates for student residences, and we have to go back and do a calculation. It's actually a fairly thorough process. It's run through student services, and it's a process that we go through every year. So no, it's not arbitrary, and we actually do have to respond to what we're seeing and come back with a reasonable rate on it.
And one more
question? Sure.
First, just want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank you too for getting grilled. I'm sure it was a great time. There's a sauna in the gym if you need to decompress. I'm wondering if you would be willing to stand in solidarity with all of us, and if the administration would, just as a show that you will be trying to do everything you can to prevent tuition increases, agree to take an equal pay cut for whatever increase we have in tuition, and then we'll just know that we can all work together because nobody wants that to happen. And I'm wondering if today, if you can say that you are willing to go down that path and work with us moving forward to actually fix the situation instead of like consult with us and then push it through. What do you say?
well, Martin tells his thoughts. I will say this you again. Google executive compensation freezes for British Columbia in the university sector, and I can't speak on.
But it doesn't matter if other people are doing worse than you. What matters is right here with us in the most expensive city in Canada.
The engaged university.
Like if people in Winnipeg are making less, I get that. They're living in Winnipeg. But do you see what I'm saying? Like what I'm really hoping for, I'm not going to say we, but what I'm hoping for here is to be able to develop some trust and know that like you're not just going to try to push this through. Like I work for a social justice organization. I know what consultation means. I fight oil companies. I know what consultation means. I don't want this to be a consultation. I don't want the vibe of corporate power taking over at my school. And that means that we have to be able to trust the administration to administrate. You know? And thank you for making less than other people, but you're still making like a lot of money.
More than the Prime Minister. 10 times in
You're making more than you need to make to afford a house in Vancouver, and that's a lot. And like you earned that, you got there, like good for you. You know, I'm hoping to be able to like own a house one day too. But like, how are we going to trust you if we bear the burden and you don't, except for like one uncomfortable hour or two where we grill you?
Well, I think certainly, as we said, we get out, we consult, and we do take the feedback to heart. Obviously the biggest indicator at the end of the day is whether, we do ponder what we've heard today and whether it does cause any, change in course. We've heard loud and clear some of the concerns that have been raised here, and ultimately we gather input. We gather input from the administrators that have concerns as well. We gather input from here, and we have to formulate it into a package that goes forward. And I certainly have my views on how things should work, where we can make a difference. Ultimately, we have to go in front of the board and have a discussion with them as well. And I think what you can certainly take away is that, irregardless, and I get the point that you're raising, but it's never a pleasant discussion to have a conversation around tuition increases. Students, it's a struggle. I know that. That's absolutely true.
So to clarify, the answer is no.
Yes, I actually just have more of a comment really. This is a consultation process, and you are attempting to consult with us students, and I think it's imperative that you do it at a time that is convenient for us. Doing it in the middle of the morning on Tuesday, when we have classes, is, as you can see, not at all convenient for us. So if you would like to consult with us meaningfully, at least do it at a time where we're able to come here and properly talk to you at a time that is not putting our classes, our grades, I'm an international student. Being at school is my priority. But if I also have to put my priority aside to tell you that you shouldn't be raising my tuition fees, something is not right here.
Yeah.
So if you want to speak to us, we would love to speak to you, but do it at a time where we would be able to properly speak to you and not get on the 95 from downtown, rush in to tell you, hey, you shouldn't be raising my tuition fees for future reference.
So there have been a number of consultation sessions, here in Burnaby, in Surrey. So there are other things, but we hear you, and I will give you our assurance that this was not an evil, deliberate strategy to look at the schedule and say most midterms are ahead right now.
I think it should be considered.
Can you make other consultations more aware, like with the social media, or even like send them a mass email just like participants?
And more than one on each campus at different times.
It shouldn't be that students have to advocate to get people into a consultation. It's supposed to be a top-down thing. Come and talk to us. Come and talk, because we're friends.
That's good feedback. The message do get out. I'm surprised to hear that. It should. We will take a look at what happened last month.
I would just like to sort of make a comment. So yeah, the idea of the sort of response to that question, that's saying, oh well, this wasn't done in a malicious way. It's almost more alarming that that the response is, well, we weren't trying to make this at an inconvenient time. It almost sounds like the actual needs of the students were not considered when you were looking. Like I myself am, so I am a graduate student, but I'm auditing an undergraduate course. I am skipping a midterm right now so that I can be here, so that I can help, so I can participate, so I can actually, be a part of this consultation process. So it's like there are people who physically could not be here, right? So it's a little alarming when the response is, well, actually there was almost no consideration that this is midterm time and this is a dedicated consultation with students. So that's maybe something to think about in the future. I understand that, yes, everything works backwards from the budget time, but if we're not also considering the actual substantive needs of students and like when people can actually consult and input, that's a little alarming. I'd also just like to say, again, this is not really a question, but a comment on the whole process. I'm sort of like, I understand that this was sort of it was, I don't want to say advertised, but this was kind of like, it's a consultation, it's an information session, and I understand that there is information that you have to give us, and that there are rationales for decisions that are being made. However, I think a lot of us here are feeling very dissatisfied with this, just in the sense that we are only getting rationales for decisions rather than actually paying attention to the substance of what we are saying and actually considering this. So and I also am like, I understand that you maybe feel very put on the spot at this point because we have multiple times brought up how much money you make. So I don't want that to actually sort of skew the point in your mind, because when you go talk to the board, we are not going to see what report you have produced from this consultation. So if there's at least anything that you can do in order to actually allow us to, I don't want to say approve the message that you're going to take to the board, but so that we can actually make sure that the points we've made are clear moving forward. Because it's not always the case. As someone I'm one of the chief stewards for TSSU, I have often felt like I've had a meeting with either HR, senior admin, and I feel like we've had agreement in the room, so not even really what we're talking about here, right? Because I don't know if there's agreement here. But it's like I felt like there has been agreement in the room, and then I found out that the message going to departments is actually the exact opposite of what we talked about. So some kind of accountability process there needs to be on the table, and we really need to again, like sort of build and like have trust in the administration to actually represent our points as we are communicating them. So if there's any comment you can make.
Yeah, no, certainly, there's multiple ways, as we go forward and have discussions with our board. Obviously we convey a message, but it's not unusual for other messages to be directly conveyed to the board, whether it's through a submission to the board or through whatever means is deemed appropriate. But I think it's important to our board. I would say, if I'm having a discussion with our board, I want to make sure that I represent the views that I've heard in the community, whether I agree with them or not. I won't, you know, I'm saying that irregardless of this subject or any other subject, but I want to make sure that I do reveal the views that I've heard in the community on any topic that we're talking about with our board. And so the more direct, the better.
Someone in the back wasn't spoken.
Oh, needs the mic.
I'm not a very good public speaker, so excuse me for being nervous, but I'm an international undergraduate student, and I was actually watching this from home, and just so you know, like the link to chat doesn't work. So like, I also have to hop on a 95 to get here. I just want you to know that like with this, I don't know much about the numbers and stuff like that, but I have a lot of friends who are also international, and I want you to know that like these people have parents that work very hard, and they themselves they work very hard, like extremely hard. Exactly. They don't have time for anything else, even for like social time, and it's just to pay for tuition. And I hope you know that this tuition hike will put some students out of school, because like I'm an undergraduate, I have a couple of years more left, and like I won't be able to finish my degree if this hike keeps going on every year, you know? Like, and that will potentially put me like I just won't have a future at all, because I won't have a degree that I have invested in, that I pay like, and about the scholarships, like they're not enough. Like I strive for like straight A's so I can get these scholarships and bursaries, but like they don't even cover like half of one semester. You know, and like don't make like I hope you won't make this like I hope you won't make education a privilege for those who can afford it, and it becomes something that people who can't afford it, like I don't deserve education, and like I'm really passionate about what I'm studying, so I really hope you won't put me out of school.
Thank you for coming here and putting that extra effort. And just so you know, certainly the grandparent clause of the students, attached students, once they're here, not doubling the tuition by more than twice the domestic. You know, it was one way to try and at least give some certainty, so that don't come these big surprises.
That's what happens when you treat budgets like bottom lines. These are lives. These are lives. It's not a bottom line on a budget, it's lives.
You have room to 12. It's 12, but if there's some more, you have your hand up. Last question.
Well, I saw one, so not much.
I'd like to speak a bit to what you said about this process and the idea of a consultation, also what Jane said. If this was really a consultation, I don't see that you would have already had these numbers ready, and then you would have presented them to us. A consultation involves coming up to a point together. So this is a telling. This is not a consultation. So I would suggest in the future that maybe we use some different language around that, because it's giving us the idea that we do have some kind of input into what tuition hikes will look like, when clearly we do not. So this is not a consultation. This is you telling us what you've already decided.
I'm not one thing to add, not saying that we should move towards an information session. We should have real consultation. just clarify.
More input at the beginning of this process before you've already had the plan and you're more or less presenting it, and it's more or less a finality unless we do something about it, which we will. You know, why not have consultations at the beginning before you draw all of this finished product, which you're willing to present, or you're going to present to the board? It's a lot easier that way, right?
Yeah, no, actually, I must admit, I find it a lot more useful if we put up a model and get reactions to it than if we just start with a blank piece of paper. I think the conversation goes all over the map. You guys have seen something, we're getting clear communications as to what you think about it. I think, you know what, if we started with a blank piece of paper, I don't know that it's
not going to work.
Well, I mean, much less of a finished sketch, say. You know.
So this is far from finished, so far from finished.
Hi. Yeah. Just to finish up, I'd like to clarify what was said by
said by you guys earlier about this information and possibly the slides being available to other people after this consultation. Is that going to be available on your website, or is it just on the web, posted on your social media links? Can we get some more specification about that?
Yeah, so it is actually on our website right now, and maybe I'll work with Aaron to get the word out in terms of where the location is.
Okay, thank you.
So I have 2 things in front of you.
Listen, really appreciate you guys turning up. Really appreciate you being honest with us, candid with us, and sharing your thoughts. And our apologies for the midterm